you today? It's so great to see you again. While I was growing up, my grandfather had a home business in which he, my dad, aunt, and uncle all worked. You can imagine how many conflicts occur when personal life and business blended together in one pot. As a child, I was often put in the position of hearing everyone's problems and trying to help them. As a therapist today, I'm still listening to people's problems and helping them resolve conflict. In my program, I use analogy stories followed by real-life examples, not actual cases, to shed insight into various situations. Hypothetical names will be added to the stories to make them come alive. You may even find yourself in the story. Today's featured story is the cow story.
Dr. Rita, I can't wait to hear the cow story. Can you tell us a little bit about the story?
It was a beautiful day when Ken took his 3-year-old son Tommy for a ride in the country. Spotting something out in a field, Tommy asked if they could go see it. After trekking through the tall grass, Tommy was seeing a cow for the first time, and he asked a million questions. Later that evening, Tommy told his mommy all about the cow, overemphasizing its 4 big legs and stuff hanging down from his tummy. Daddy said there are others, and that's where milk comes from, he explained proudly. Ken interrupted. No. The cow also have a head, a tail, and a back. No, Tommy shouted. It only have 4 legs and others hanging down the stomach. Do you think Tommy's description was wrong? No, because Tommy was small, he could only see the cow's feet and stomach. But Ken, being so much taller, viewed the entire animal. Both saw the same cow but from different angles, and both descriptions were correct. Often when conflict arises, people can only see their viewpoint. If Jeff thinks he's right, he's pretty sure that Joe is wrong, and will try to persuade him over to his side. Joe thinks his idea is the right one, so he disagrees and they argue. No two people are exactly the same. We have different backgrounds, personalities, educational levels, and many other differences. And therefore, it's impossible to agree all the time. Interpersonal relationship can be hazardous to our health. When conflict arises, it may cause physical and mental health at home and at work. Health can also be declined, leaving one with insomnia, heart palpitation, anxiety, and the like. The moral of the cow story is a great example of many of our life situations. I would like to discuss some of the conflicts I've seen which exemplify this analogy principle. Let's start at the most basic level to understand our own human nature. Let's first look at conflict between 2 toddlers.
The truck.
Jay and Bradley were playing in the same room. Jay had a yellow truck and he made lots of noises imitating the sound of the engine. He was so involved that he didn't notice anything else. Suddenly, Bradley came over and grabbed the truck away from Jake. Jake pushed him and started screaming that he wanted his truck back. Jay thought, it's my truck. I was playing with it first. Bradley thought, I want the yellow truck. If I want it, I can have it. Kids at that age always think their way is the right way and are unable to consider another person's perspective or the consequences.
Conflict in school-age children.
Young school-age children are able to express themselves and consider another person's perspective. They resolve some conflicts with other children some of the time, but still need adult intervention.
The new friend.
3rd graders Jenny and Julie were best friends and played together every day at recess. One day, Jenny ran to the swing to play with a new girl in school. Julie became angry and sad. Why is she playing with her? I thought we're best friends. Julie was in tears when she came home and decided not to play with Jenny anymore. Jenny didn't understand why Julie didn't want to be friends, so she wouldn't talk to Julie either. Yet both girls were sad because they missed each other. Julie's mom invited Jenny and her mom on a picnic. Since there were no other kids to play with, the girls talked with each other. Jenny asked, you told me we will be friends forever. Why did you play with another girl at recess? Jenny said, she was all alone, so I went to play with her. You and I play all the time. She's new in the school and doesn't have anyone to play with. Julie asked, so are we still friends? Yes, maybe 3 of us can play together at school. That's a good idea, replied Julie. You and I can play together after school. Afterwards, they understood each other and the conflict was resolved with great outcome. Today, their friendship will thrive. They talk often and still get together. They learn at an early age the wisdom and power of compromise.
The dress.
Once there was a little girl who refused to wear a dress to kindergarten. Her mother was very upset because she spent a lot of money on her school clothes. She wanted her little princess to look beautiful in her class to impress the kindergarten teacher. To exercise her authority as a mother, she told the little girl to wear the dress anyway. She urged her to get into the car because they were running late for school. The little girl cried all the way to school. She thought, I don't want to go in the classroom because boys laugh at girls who wear dresses. I don't want to go to school. Before she knew it, she was at the school. Her mother did not even give her a chance to explain why she did not want to wear a dress to school. You see, the mother and the daughter looked at the dress from different perspectives. The mother was looking at the financial aspect of the situation. She did not want to waste the money to spend for her daughter's back-to-school dresses. The little girl, on the other hand, focused on the social aspect of the situation. She did not want to wear the dress because boys at school would crawl under the table and look at girls' underwear and laugh at them. The mom insists the little girl obey her. But if she had tried to understand her little girl's perspective, she probably would not have forced her daughter to wear a dress to school. Just like the cow story. The father corrected the son by telling him the cow has a head, a tail, and a body. Only if he had bent down to his son's height, he would understand why his son thought a cow only had 4 legs and a stomach.
Conflict with teenagers.
Adolescence begins affirming their identities and own opinions, yet may still lack the maturity to see another's perspective. When teenagers insist on having their own way, a battle begins. Peace can only be found when one is willing to put his gender aside and try understanding the other person's viewpoint.
The radio.
Brother John and Mark were at a standoff. John said, I thought I told you to turn down the radio. Turn it down. Mark said, I did. John said, no, you didn't. It's just as loud as it was before. Turn it down or I will do it myself. Mark said, don't you dare touch my radio. You're so selfish. John said, you're the selfish one. All you think about is yourself. The argument escalated and Mom came in before they turned into fist fights. She asked them to calm down and discuss the situation. John said he wanted the volume turned down so he could prepare for a speech. Mark needed to hear a particular program on the radio in order to complete an assignment. They had jumped to conclusion without knowing what the other needed and create a bad misunderstanding. Once they understood, they resolved the problem and discovered the importance of considering the other person's view.
Teen-adult conflict.
Teen-adult conflicts are common because teens now challenge much of what they're told. Parents can foster good relationship by considering their child's maturity level and personality and respecting their ideas. When parents insist on having their own way, a power struggle ensues which won't be resolved until they're willing to listen and respect their teen. Let's observe a conflict between a father and his teenage son.
The microwave.
After a long day of exam followed by football practice, Frank was famished. At home, he piled leftovers and bread onto the plates and put it in the microwave. Just right before he turns it on, his father screamed, "Stop! You don't put bread and leftover in the microwave at the same time. Put them separately." "What a control freak," Frank retorted. "I can't even heat food in the microwave my way. I don't believe this." He stormed to his room with the cold food and stayed there the rest of the evening. How could this conflict have been avoided? While the father knew the proper way of heating food, this was not the time to talk about it. His son didn't care about the proper way of microwaving. He just wanted to eat. This conflict could have been entirely avoided if the father had respected his son's opinion and trusted his reasoning. If everyone in the stories above had discussed the situation, incorrect assumption would not have been made and relationship would have become stronger. As parents, it can be difficult to accept your child as an independent thinker, capable of making his own decisions. Little children depend on parents to help them form conclusions, while teens want to make most decisions themselves. Power struggles are broken when parents respect the teens as individuals who have their own perspectives, opinions, priorities, and ideas. Disagreement do not mean disrespect. Listening without interruption, accepting each other's ideas, and finding a solution both parties agree on are the keys to resolving conflict. 99% of teens who talk to their parents are looking for sympathy and understanding. They're not looking for answers. They want to figure it out themselves. Rather than listening with a closed mouth, parents often tell the kids what they're doing wrong, or eagerly share the wonderful advice they've accumulated over the years, which most often leads to anger. Respecting your child's idea will foster good adult-to-adult relationship.
Conflicts in young adults. College reunion.
George and Linda were old college friends who had kept in touch after graduation. Years later, they got together to plan a reunion but disagreed on the location. George wanted to have it in an upscale, centrally located hotel, but Linda wanted it in Patty's house, which is also centrally located. They disagreed and the situation became tense. When they realized they were looking at the same problem from different angles, they came to a solution. George thought his idea made sense because everyone could get a room right where the party was being held and no one would have to drive. Linda was concerned that some may not be able to afford a hotel room. They compromised by having the party at the hotel. Whoever wanted could get a room and stay there. Linda's friend's house was also an option and close enough that people could drive there to stay if they desired. This was a win-win situation. The party was a success and George and Linda's friendship was better than ever.
The funeral.
Once there was a couple driving home from a funeral of a close friend. Tom commented to his wife, Kathy, "It's too bad he died so young. It was his fault because he ate the wrong food and didn't exercise." And on he went. Kathy became upset and yelled, "What's wrong with you? What about his wife and kids? Who's going to take care of them? You have no compassion. No wonder I don't feel love from you. You don't care for others." Emotions escalated and they gave each other silent treatment for many days after. What was the problem? Tom was looking at the factual side of the problem and Kathy was seeing the emotional. They both were sad, but Tom was upset that his friend hadn't taken care of himself. Kathy was also sad but was concerned about the wife and kids. When they finally understood, they were feeling the same emotion, but expressing it differently. They held each other and cried. This conflict had exposed deeper issues that they were able to work on as a result of these situations.
Middle-aged adult conflicts.
Some middle-aged adults may become rigid in their thinking and have a hard time accepting others' differing opinions.
The curfew.
A couple in their 40s argue about their teenage daughter's curfew. Ken thought a 10:30 weekend curfew was in order, mainly because that was what his parents had set for him. If his daughter couldn't follow his rule, he believed he should not be allowed to go out. Meanwhile, his wife Mary believed a more liberal weekend curfew was in order, allowing their daughter freedom on weekend to come home later. When parents disagreed, the daughter was in control and she had her own way. It was a lose-lose situation. Loving and caring for their daughter was their common interest. The therapist suggests they each assumed the other one was right. Once they did that, they were able to come up with a solution. They set the curfew at 10:30, but if for some reason she wanted more time, such as finishing up a movie, she would call and ask for permission. If the parent decided the request was reasonable, they would agree. This issue was resolved when they believed each of their ideas were right. Now, let's look at conflict between a middle-aged man and his son.
Yard work.
It was mid-afternoon when Jimmy, a college student living on campus, came home for college. He earned good grades, made his own rules, and kept a part-time job. And now, after arriving home, the battle began. His parents didn't bother to see that he had matured while he was away and treated him like a child, reminded him often to do this and do that. His father yelled, "We haven't seen you since you got here. You're living in this house. You have to follow the rules just like everybody else. The grass is long and I want you to go cut it." The son retorted, "There isn't any freedom here. I can't do what I need to do," and stormed out. The father and Jimmy had different priorities. The father was excited that Jimmy was home and he finally getting help with the yard work. But Jimmy's best friend was leaving college that night, and this was the only time they could get together. Without communicating to each other, they both made inaccurate assumptions in their head. The father assumed the son was not responsible, and the son assumed that his dad was trying to control his life. Neither one of the assumptions were accurate. The father forgot that his grown son had his own agenda, just like everybody else. The son wanted to make a decision of what he wanted, when he wanted to help out. Later, the son called his dad and apologized. He told him he would mow the lawn the next day, explained to his dad that his friend had to leave for college that evening, and his dad also apologized to his son for not respecting his schedule. When they finally communicated rather than making assumptions, they were able to have a happy ending. It may sometimes take time for adults to accept the adult children. But when they work on assuming the best about their children rather than the worst, they were able to build a better relationship with their children. The power of positive assumption and empathetical understanding of the other partner's desire is the bridge to broken relationships.
Conflict in older adults.
As kids grow up and move away, parents often deal with an empty nest syndrome, and they find themselves redefining their roles and identities. When there's nothing else to focus on, it's only two of them again. Hidden issues tend to surface, and they find they have become an unhappy, disgruntled couple.
Empty nest.
A retired couple struggling with this came to see a therapist. During their early years, when Andy advanced his career, Jeannie had cared for the house. Back then, Andy was content with those changes, but now he wanted a say in everything, including cleaning out the drawers and rearranging the closet. This was an extremely difficult adjustment for Jeannie, who now had trouble finding things and felt like Andy was invading her territory and destroying her system. They quarreled over everything and couldn't compromise on anything. They wanted to remodel the kitchen but couldn't agree on the type of counter, flooring, or color of the walls. They were so stubborn, they were ready to call off the entire project. But nonetheless, the house seemed worn out and they didn't like it. How did they work it out? The therapist suggests they consult an interior designer for ideas. They agree, with the help of a third person, were able to successfully remodel the kitchen. Sometimes even adults need help dealing with their conflicts.
The tomato.
A couple in their 70s had a hard time getting along with each other. Eva complained that her husband Ted didn't care for her because he wouldn't listen when she talked to him. She asked him to go to the store for a tomato, but when he came home without one, "Didn't you hear me? I asked you to get me a tomato." Ted replied, "You didn't tell me to buy a tomato." Eva yelled, "You don't love me because you don't listen to me. You don't even care about me." Okay, was this really about tomato? Of course not. It sounds ridiculous that not buying tomato can cause someone to feel unloved, but let's analyze what really each party was thinking. Eva assumed that Ted didn't care for her because he didn't get the tomato. Ted honestly didn't hear her ask for tomato and thought she was wrongly accusing him. Neither assumption was correct. Ted has a very compartmentalized mind. When he focused on one task, he tuned out everything else, unlike Eva, who could think about several things at once. Ted had heard Eva talking to him from the kitchen, but he was concentrating on checking the email on the computer. She talked about the grandkids, then asked him to buy a tomato, and then went back to talking about the grandkids again. He did not hear her asking him for a tomato. After discussing this, they learned that they have significant communication differences and that neither intend to hurt the other. they were able to find a new way to communicate. Eva made sure to get his attention before asking him anything important and made shopping lists for him to avoid misunderstanding. Ted strived to give his undivided attention and took notes when she talked to him. So far, we have examined many types of conflict among people of all ages. In each situation, during counseling sessions, the therapist needed to help patients to see the other side. The cow story helped people to gain insight in handling conflict. Remember how the father in the cow story assumed Tommy was wrong before he saw the cow from his height? They were looking at the same cow from different angles. Now, let's use other examples to illustrate the principle of the cow story. First principle, be aware of thinking that the other person is wrong and that you're right. Consider the other person's perspectives first. Making an assumption without finding out the other points of view leads to conflict. In the dress, the mother assumed her daughter refused to wear a dress to school simply to disobey her. Remember, Julie assumed that Jenny didn't want to be her friend anymore because she played with another girl at recess? In the radio, teenage brothers John and Mark assumed that the other was being deliberately disrespecting the other. George and Linda in college reunion couldn't agree on the location, assumed the other person's opinion was wrong. Ted and Eva in the tomato assumed the other partners intentionally hurting the other. Conflicts originate from false assumptions, made in part on our own experiences. Since everyone has different experiences, you must assume that your view most likely will not mirror another's. When people consider another person's perspective before drawing a conclusion, it is likely to have totally different outcome. In the microwave, once the father and son began respecting each other's priorities, they have a better understanding of each other. In the tomato, the couple began connecting on a much deeper level. They applied the moral of the cow story by looking at each other's perspectives and found a healthy compromise. Second principle, assume the best about the other person rather than the worst. In many of the examples, both parties could be right as they viewed the same situation from different perspectives. Exactly like the father and son in the cow story, they were both right, but were viewing the cow from different angles. If you can assume the other person is also correct, you'll find a great solution to your situation. Remember the couple who went to the funeral and fought all the way home? Who was guilty? Neither. They were looking at the same situation from a different angle, factual versus emotional. In curfew, the parents developed a good plan once they learned to accept each other's ideas. In tomato, the couple needed to accommodate each other's way of communicating. There was a healthy ending once they saw from each other's perspectives. It's not easy in the heat of the battle to consider the other person's perspective and to assume that you both can be correct. When someone insists that he's right, it usually turns into anger, which leads to a quarrel. If you speak when you're angry, you will end up making a speech that you forever regret. The words that come out from both of your mouth damage both of your heart, and the truth is always lost in a quarrel. You don't get anything resolved anyway. How many people go through life trying to be always right and end up pushing people away? Are you one of these people? Do you feel like you end up hurting others and also getting hurt yourself because you have isolated yourself to the point that no one wants to talk to you anymore? It can be a tough, lonely place when you're right on your own island, but can't share with anyone else. Shedding our human nature about wanting to be right is impossible unless we rely on God to give us His humility. How can we get along better? By following the principle in Philippians 2:3, which states, "In humility consider others better than you." Each one of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Jesus said, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." It is not human nature to act in humility, but we're able to do so because of what Jesus has done for us. Jesus, Son of God, was willing to humble Himself and come to this world. He mingled with those who were in pain and those who were in sin. He loves us so much, He was willing to die for us. Can you think of anyone in this world who would be willing to die for you? Hardly anyone in this world loves you so much that he or she would be willing to die for you. But Jesus did that. All he asks us in return for his love is to give his love to others. God loves you and the other person. What does God mean when he says to love others? It means that you are willing to humble yourself, to listen to his or her perspective, to assume the best about the other person rather than the worst. When you can apply these principles, you will end up with better outcome in any relationship conflict. You're not only able to maintain a good relationship, but you will also make better decisions with two people working together. If you insist your way, you may win an argument, but will lose the relationship. By following Jesus' examples, extend love to others and avoid making the same mistake like the father in the cow story, you'll be able to open to other person's opinions. If you assume the other person is right also, you'll probably be able to make a better decision together. Just like the cow story, you will be seeing your cow in different perspectives. So although the description may be different, you're talking about the same cow. On the contrary, if you assume that the other person is wrong, you will make assumption about his intention. Your assumption is going to be wrong most of the time because you're basing on your assumption on your past experiences. Your assumption will not be accurate until you're willing to look into another person's perspective that's based on their experiences. When you walk in their shoes first, you'll be able to make more accurate conclusion. If you do follow this principle, God will be able to work in you and work through you. After all, it is when we get out of the way and let God be glorified through our witnesses that the world is a better world to live in for all of us. I hope you found today's show insightful and helpful. I would like to hear from you so I can pray for you and answer your questions in the future shows. My email address is care@dr-rita.com. You can also call me at 517-332-6300. Take good care of yourself. God loves you no matter what. See you again soon.
This is so insightful, Dr. Rita. Be sure to tune in to Dr. Rita's next show for more stories. If you want to read more analogy stories from Dr. Rita, you can order Dr. Rita's book, The Hippo That Fell Off the Seesaw, and Other Parables from Christian Counseling. You can also listen to her stories from her radio shows. Search for Stream in the Desert from Voice America or Silver Lining, Stories of Transformation from BBM Global Network. Be sure to come back and see the next episode.